Absolutely. So first of all, good morning, everybody. My name is Carlton Lane Fiesta, known as the Mortgage Fiesta. Today we'll be doing Down Payment Assistance 101. First thing I want to do is make sure you guys can hear me and see my shared screen. So if you're either in the chat or can unmute yourself, please let me know if we're good. And then we'll get started.
Well, it looks good here. We see your screen, can hear you fine.
Okay, cool. All right. So few disclaimers before we get started. So this is Down Payment Assistance 101. It is intended to kind of give you guys all kind of a brief understanding of how down payment assistance works. Also allow you to ask any questions, okay? My rule of thumb is if there's a dumb question, yes, it's the question you did not ask, okay? So feel free, ask any questions that you guys have, because ultimately, if you decide to use this information with a client, you want to make sure that you understand it well enough to present it to others, okay? So let's get started. So once again, my name is Carlton Lane Fiesta. I've been in the business for over 12 years as a mortgage loan originator. I'm a graduate of California State University, Northridge, as a business administration graduate, and born and raised here, Los Angeles, California. Father of three beautiful children, professional affiliations. Of course, I'm an affiliate here of Greater Los Angeles, but also affiliate of Los Angeles Southwest and Inglewood, as well as being a member of Alpha Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. My passion is really entrepreneurship and home ownership. So for those of you who may be looking to do business with me in the future, I'm truly passionate about helping people get into homes with little to no money down, because it is possible. I don't do this by myself. I do have a team that assists me with our loans, from processing to executive assistant, as well as other loan officers on our team. So this is a bit of a snapshot of members on my team that can either assist you and or your clients. I am not personally bilingual, but my processor, Joanne Martinez, is bilingual. So those of you who might have Spanish-speaking clients, that would normally be who I would refer them to. Everyone else, English-speaking, I kind of take those clients myself, but we do have a team here that can assist your clients, okay? So what is Monarch Mortgage? Before we start talking about the assistance, you guys need to know who we are, right? So Monarch Mortgage, we're an independent mortgage brokerage located here in Los Angeles, California. A mortgage broker is different than a direct lender, okay? So direct lender lends their own money. They typically employ their own underwriting team. And what we do as a mortgage broker is that we send your client to the bank, right? When I first started in the industry, direct lending was always promoted as the way to go, okay? If you had a client, send them to a direct lender, right? However, in this market especially, mortgage brokers are winning, okay? Mortgage brokers on average save your client over $8,000 on a transaction. That's typically in discount points. So for those of you who are familiar, if let's say the interest rate today is 6.5%, if you're going through a direct lender, that cost for that rate can be 1 to 2% of the purchase price of the home, or excuse me, of the loan amount of the home. So direct lenders typically have, mortgage brokers typically have discounts that direct lenders do not offer. So we're typically beating direct lenders in interest rate and or cost, okay? The other thing that is of most concern to most people is underwriting and speed. So as a mortgage broker, we are typically, the fastest deal that I've closed is 10 days, okay? Which sounds crazy, but I didn't believe I could do that on a direct lend. I was scared when I started working as a mortgage broker that we would not be able to close that quickly. We actually are closing faster than traditional banks, okay? And primary reason for that is, even though we're sending the loan to a bank, that bank typically has I know one bank in particular has over 100 underwriters on their team. So for that reason, we're able to close quicker than most, okay? By the way, I'm not going to be reading all these slides verbatim. There's kind of this a point of information for me, but if anybody sees anything and wants to ask a question, feel free to do so. I appreciate the interaction during these types of presentations. So programs we offer, as well as, of course, we offer down payment assistance. We also do standard VA, FHA, conventional. We have non-QM products such as bank statements, 1099 only products, W-2 only products, no income docs products, DSCR, which is for your investment clients typically who are buying properties and just using the rental income as income. Typically with at least 20% down, we can get that deal done. And of course, down payment assistance. We already talked about our close times, interest rates, customer service. We're big on that. We want to make sure your client feels happy about working with us. We do sell your clients when it comes to purchase. As you guys know, part of the process of getting an offer accepted is very important, right? So we do speak to your listing agents that you send the offer to make sure they have all the information necessary. Some people have a lot of false connotations about down payment assistance. Some of the biggest ones that I've seen is the program running out of money. So we'll be discussing that. Most of the programs we're discussing today have funds available. If the program will be running out of money, is something I would do share with your client or with yourself. And or it's going to take, a long time to close. Not completely true. Most of these programs can close within 30 days. If it's a traditional loan, we can do it within 14 days, but down payment assistance, you're typically looking at about 30 days. One of the greatest things I would like to also share about Monarch Mortgage is our close rate is extremely high compared to most. Most traditional banks are looking at about a 75% opening escrow to closing rate. We're at 98% as of 2023. So, meaning that if a client is pre-approved through our bank, we're closing 98% of the transactions we did. It was actually 100% in 2022. Okay, so we're doing a great job from pre-approving to closing. All right. So as far as what we're going to be discussing today, one of the things that we're looking at is the LA City program. Keep in mind, and I'm going to repeat this a few times, but the Los Angeles City program is for the city of Los Angeles, okay? So any other city that has city in its name, Culver City, the city of Gardena, the city of Linwood, is not the city of Los Angeles, okay? So we're specifically talking about a geographic area that's defined as the city of Los Angeles. And we'll be looking at a graphic as well as discussing some cities here shortly. We're also going to be looking at the Golden State Finance Authority, also known as GSFA. So if you guys hear GSFA, I'm referring to the Golden State Finance Authority, as well as CalHFA. CalHFA has down payment assistance that exists today that they traditionally have offered, covering the down payment and closing costs. They've also have the Dreams for All program. It's not live today, but we're going to be talking about how we can help your client get enrolled for the CalHFA Dreams for All program. So in this first slide, we're talking about the amount of funds given per program, just to give you guys a snapshot of how this all works. So in the first beginning of this presentation, we're going to be looking at basically a snapshot for each program, what each program offers, so that way you have an understanding of where you might want to go with your particular client situation, okay? So Los Angeles City, that program offers up to $161,000. Person has to be low income to qualify for that amount, and there's tiers, which we'll discuss in a second, but it's up to $161,000 that can be used towards down payment and closing costs. CalHFA, their traditional program, offers up to 5.5% for down payment and closing costs. GSFA offers up to 5%. Dreams for All, that is going to be released in April, okay, is 20% down up to $150,000, okay? So that's basically the amount of funds that you can look at offering a client through these programs. Some of the program details. as far as first-time home buyers, in most cases, they have to be a first-time home buyer, except for GSFA. GSFA does allow for people who are not first-time home buyers. However, they can't own another property when they open escrow. So the definition of a first-time home buyer is defined as not having a ownership interest in a property for the past 3 years. GSFA, they'll allow you to, sell a property and basically purchase a new one as a first-time home buyer. So they don't have a first-time home buyer requirement. Okay. First generation is the only, and I just kind of realized there's an error on this slide. Dreams for All does have a first generation requirement. Okay. So meaning that the person who the borrower's parents cannot own a house within the past 7 years. Okay, Cal HAFA will do an audit from the person that sends in their application to make sure that their family members basically do not own a home. Okay, so I apologize for the error on this slide, but the Cal HAFA Dreams for All, the last program here, does have a first generation home buyer requirement. For a home buyer education, basically all programs require that. Home buyer education, if you're not familiar with that, it's an 8-hour class that they have to take. Some of them are offered online. Cal HAFA's cost $99. There's others that are free, some that are in person as well. As long as it's a HUD approved counseling service, typically that's acceptable for everyone. Cal HAFA does have an online version for the Dreams for All program that your client needs to take as well. Okay, so I do recommend, if people are going to do down payment assistance, get pre-approved first. Make sure you qualify for the program. Every program has different classes that it recommends for that client to take. So unfortunately, there's not a one, some classes can kind of transfer over, but not all classes do. So we don't want to waste your client's time or money. So we typically advise to go through the process getting pre-approved first, and then we'll recommend what class they should take at the as a part of that. Okay. Minimum required. Okay. So this is down payment assistance, not a free house. Okay. We assist people with helping them with their down payment and closing costs, but they do still need to have some money. Okay. One of the primary reasons your client has to have some money is the EMD, right? When you open escrow on a house, they need to put something into escrow. That money does not come from any assistance program. It has to come from your client. Okay. So they have to have enough money to open escrow. So keep that in mind. Whether that's 1% or 3% or what have you, it all depends on what you can get accepted. But just kind of keep that in mind, because I think a lot of realtors gloss over that fact. Even if the program covers everything, okay, and the client can get a refund in that situation, but they still have to open escrow with something of their own funds. Okay. So minimum required for the LA City LIPA MIPA program, and what LIPA MIPA, we'll get into definitions in a second, but they require at least 1% of the client to have their own funds, 1% of the purchase price, right? So if it's a condo, let's say, in Los Angeles, and it's $500,000, they need $5,000. Okay. For Cal HAFA and GSFA, they'll cover the down payment and the majority of the closing costs, but it's recommended that they have at least 2% for Cal HAFA and GSFA. If the seller is willing to contribute at least 2% towards the closing costs, the client could technically not have to come in with anything. Okay. Dreams for All, the way that they allow you to use those particular funds is up to 20% that could be used towards down payment and closing costs, right? So in that situation, maybe we have to take, let's say, 2 or 3% from the 20 and apply it to closing costs. So let's say it's 17% down and 3% for closing costs, something like that. We get to play with the funds to kind of make it so the client may not have to come in with anything. In most cases, we're trying to structure the loan to cover the full down payment so they don't have mortgage insurance, which decreases their monthly payment. But in some cases, maybe the client doesn't have the money to pay for closing costs, or the seller is unwilling to contribute. So, we may have to structure it a little bit differently, but technically they don't have to have, I'm saying this loosely, they don't have to have any money to purchase this property using the Dreams for All program. However, those of you who have opened escrow, you already know there are appraisal costs, there's the EMD, there's the inspection, there are other costs that the borrower still has to have money for. So just keep that in mind whenever we're talking about down payment assistance. So I see a few questions coming up, so I'm gonna go ahead and take us, sorry, let me back up here for a second. If you own a property in another state and don't have property in LA, am I considered a first-time home buyer here? That answer would be no. You are still a homeowner, so you would not be a first-time home buyer here. Typically, whenever you open escrow, title companies do a title search to see if there's other properties, excuse me, to see if there's other properties that you may have a ownership interest in. Okay, so for that reason, you'll be you'll be considered a non-first time home buyer. So if you own a property in another state, you still own property, you are not a first time home buyer. How is first generation parents verified? What if you don't have a relationship with your parents and unsure if they own a house in the last 7 years or not? Very good question. So this first generation guideline is new. So we haven't, experienced this a whole lot to know exactly what they're going to do. I know that there are, of course, title searches and, of course, family history and stuff like that. They can do a search to do an audit. But this question actually came up recently from a different client. And I'm not sure how they're going to verify, if you don't have a relationship with your parents or what have you. Now, if you don't have if you happen to be somebody's like a foster youth or something like that, they've already identified that as being someone who meets the definition as a first generation buyer. So if you've been adopted or gone through the foster care system, you are already considered first generation home buyer. Okay, so if that's the situation. Okay, another question here. Okay, that's actually the same question I already addressed. Does out of state income qualify to purchase a home? Yes and no. Okay, so if you're going to purchase a property in the LA area or in the state of California, okay, by the way, Monarch Mortgage is licensed in California, Florida, and Michigan. We're pending for Nevada and Texas, okay? So, but let's just say that the client lives out of state, has a job out of state, they want to purchase here in California. Well, we as the bank are going to be concerned about their income, right? Are they switching jobs? Are they self-employed and maybe that job is going to come with them? And even if they're self-employed, does it make sense that the income will not change if they switch states, right? So for example, if you own a child care in Texas, but you want to move to California, right? The underwriter may question how you're going to continue to do business when you switch to a new state. So it just has to make sense for most part, okay? If they have a W-2 job, then they need to show proof that they're going to have a new job here in California, okay? So if they are using rental income or something like that from other properties they own out of state, that's perfectly fine. That translates no matter where you are, okay? Also have another question here. Repeat the states you're licensed in and pending. That's California, Florida, Michigan is currently what we're licensed in, and we're pending in Nevada and Texas, okay? So within the next 2 to 3 months, I expect to be licensed in all 5. We're not really planning on adding a whole lot more states outside of that, but we want to make sure we cover some of the relocation states that people are going to. So keep the questions coming. I appreciate them. We're going to jump back into the slides about the program here. So the next one is dealing with reserve requirements. So LIPA MIPA is the only one that has to have reserves. For those of you who are not familiar with the concept of reserves, reserves is basically money in the bank after closing, okay? So so the outside of the down payment, outside of the closing costs, is money that's still in the bank, okay? That's what reserves are. So CalHFA requires 1 month of reserves. No other program has a reserve requirement. It does not mean that the loan will not require them to have reserves, okay? So when we pre-approve a loan, we run them through AUS, which is an automated underwriting system. In that system, depending on the borrower's credit score, their debts, particularly their debt to income ratio, it may require that borrower to have reserves. Okay, so money in the bank after closing, basically is what they're looking for. Okay, so LIPA MIPA LA City requires them to have 1 month. No other program has a requirement. However, it does not mean they may not have to have reserves. So let me be a little clear on that. Maximum debt to income ratio. So the way that most of these programs look at income is defined by the way the lender calculates income. Okay, so a lot of people don't know this when it comes to income limits, which all of these programs have. But when it comes to things like bonuses, overtime, commission, we do not have to use that income to qualify your borrower. So let's say that the client, let's just say the income limit is $100,000, and the client has a base income of $100,000, but they receive overtime, and overtime is taking them to $125,000. We do not have to use that $25,000 to qualify your borrower. So they could fall under the income limit. Of course, most lenders don't know that, but it's something that it is up to the lender to determine what income they're going to use to qualify your borrower. Okay, so if as you can see from the slide, 45% is pretty much the standard, up to 45% of the gross income, not the take-home income, but the gross income of the borrower can be used to qualify, okay? If they have over a 700 credit score on most of these programs, then we can go up to 50%, okay? So 50% of their income can be used to qualify, used for them to purchase a house. LIPA MIPA does have compensating factors, so that CF stands for. So compensating factors are things like if they've been on a job for a high amount of time, or if they have money in the bank outside of closing, or if they're putting a good amount of money down. Those are things that are considered compensating factors. We'll get into the exact definitions a little bit later as well. And then of course, payback, right? Which is something that a lot of people are concerned about, right? How do we pay this money back? What are the triggering terms? Basically, for all of these programs, none of this money is free, okay? So let's be clear about that. They're gonna have to pay back this money in some shape, form, or fashion, okay? Typically, the retriggering terms on all of these programs, if you're selling the property, right? Or refinancing the property. So if you're selling, there are certain conditions to refinance it, so we'll talk a little bit about it. So if you're selling the property for a LIPA MIPA, you have to pay back the original amount of money they gave you and a percentage of the appreciation. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about that. But just to make it simple, let's say you purchase a house for $500,000 and the LIPA program gave you 20% of that money to purchase the house, which is $100,000. Okay. And then you turn back around, let's say 5 years down the line, and you sell that property, and that property is worth $100,000 more. So you bought it for $500,000 and you're selling it for $600,000. So it appreciated $100,000. If you receive 20% towards your down payment, then the MIPA program wants 20% of your appreciation. So when you sell the house for $600,000, you have to pay back 20% of the appreciation, which is $20,000, plus the $100,000 they originally gave you to purchase the house. Okay, so what does that leave the borrower with? That leaves the borrower with 80% of the appreciation, and also whatever they paid into the loan, they keep as well. So that's how it works for the LIPA MIPA program, and the Dreams for All program works the same way. Okay, so if they actually received, so it's the exact same way. So I want to re-explain it. It's the exact same way. For CalHFA and GSFA, those programs do have basically interest rates associated with the payback of that, which we'll get into shortly. All of these programs can be structured on FHA or conventional, as well as VA, even though I didn't include it here because VA, most clients aren't putting any money down at all. So you don't have a down payment requirement on VA. So it's not typical for somebody who's a veteran to also use down payment assistance. But in regards to FHA or conventional, you can use either loan type, okay, to help get the borrower into a home. All right. So that's the things to know about the LIPA micro program. We're going to be talking a little bit more about it as well. Let me go ahead and see what other questions we have. Okay, so the question was related to an earlier question about if you work in another state. So it's being more specific. So this is about being a real estate agent, right? So you're self-employed as a real estate agent, and you have a license in California as well, and you also have rental property. Okay, well, that sounds like there won't be any disruption in your income should you relocate. Now, of course, if you're relocating and you don't have business here in California, that's something that you're taking on personally. But most underwriters would not discount your income, because if you've been working in real estate in a different state and you're going to continue that in a new state, the thought is that your income won't be interrupted, even though you might have some interruption in that, but still that would be allowed. Rental property as well, that can always be used no matter where you go. Another question here. My mother has a house, but my husband's parent does not. Okay. So if your mother owns a house, then you are not, I'm assuming this is related to the first generation home buyer situation. Okay. So if your mother owns a house, you are not considered a first generation home buyer, but you could still be, of course, a first time home buyer. Right. And then as far as a husband's parents do not, yeah, that won't really matter. Right. If your mom owns a house, you're not a first generation home buyer. All right. Let's continue about LA City. So the LIPA MIPA program is intended to help low to moderate income families purchase their first home. Okay, and generally the LIPA, which is low income purchase assistance, typically doesn't run out of funds. They have a larger amount allocated towards LIPA. The moderate income program, recently this past week, we just received an email saying that program may run out of funds. Okay, so they do at times during the year increase the amount of funds they receive, or get more funds to use towards the program. But if unless you have a client that's looking to purchase within this next month or so, MIPA may be out. Okay, let's talk about what that kind of looks like a little bit. So for both LIPA and MIPA, so that's low income purchase assistance and moderate income purchase assistance, you're going to have up to $161,000 if they're considered low income. If they're moderate income and they fall within this second bracket, we'll look at income in 1 second. They'll receive up to $115,000, and if they're the last bracket, they'll receive up to $90,000. Okay, it can go up to $1,081,000 for single family homes, and for condos and townhouses, $679,250. Okay, that's for the low income, and for MIPA, there's no limits at all. All right, so let's talk about these income limits. So the way it works for LIPA MIPA is they're looking at the household income limits. Okay, so anyone over the age of 18 that resides in the house, income is being taken into account. All right, so that's one thing you got to keep in mind. So even though, let's say there's a husband and wife, and the wife is the only one on the loan, we still have to consider the husband's income for the LIPA MIPA program. Okay, this particular slide shows you for up to 8 people in a household how much income would have to be. Typically, purchasing in the city of Los Angeles, most people are going to have to fall within a moderate income bracket to even make it happen. It is possible if you're low income and have no debt to purchase property, but it is going to be extremely tight. And it's going to be, of course, the lower valued properties that we have here in the Los Angeles area. Any questions about this slide, let me know before we move on. So just to recap, low income, that's $161,000. Moderate 120, that's $115,000. Mod 150 is $90,000 that they'll assist you with receiving, okay? And of course, income is based on how the lender calculates income. So keep that in mind, because some people can, let's talk about self-employed people, right? This is basically tax season right now. A lot of people have not filed their 2023 taxes. So literally, depending on how much they're advised to write off, you can make a deal happen, right? So somebody could earn $100,000, and let's just say it's a husband and wife, right? And the wife earns $100,000 and the husband owns $100,000, but the husband happens to be a real estate agent and can write off $95,000 of that $100,000, right? They'll still be able to fall within this two-person household income limit, right? So you got to be a little strategic to kind of think about that, because when you're self-employed, we go off of basically your adjusted gross income, so your income after write-offs. So there is ways to kind of make that happen, especially in this time frame when people haven't filed taxes yet. Okay. All right. Property requirements. So if you're using this program, you have 1-unit properties only that can be used towards this. That's your condos, your townhouses, single family residences, or what have you. The only thing that I would pay extreme attention to for LIPA MIPA is it cannot be tenant occupied unless the tenant is the prospective home buyer. So basically you can't purchase a property that has a tenant in it for this particular program, okay? But outside of that, it has to be a 1-unit property, and basically we're good to go. Down payment assistance, just so you know, even though they're giving a large amount of funds, if the client has over $40,000, they must contribute 80% of their liquid assets beyond the $40,000, okay? So basically, this program is intended to help people who don't have the money. So if they do have the money and it's above $40,000, they have to contribute that. Now, if they have retirement accounts are not included in this, okay? So if they have a 401k or something like that, they don't have to, worry about pulling money out of the 401k. But if it's liquid, such as your checking and savings or what have you, then you will, the client will have to contribute, if they have above $40,000, 80% of whatever that number is, okay? In most cases, people are using this program, don't even have that amount of money sitting around, but it could come up, right? Getting into compensating factors. So this is how we get to 50% debt to income ratio instead of using 45%. If the middle FICO is 700 or higher, if the borrower is investing 3% of their own funds as a down payment, if the monthly debt is less than $50 per month and the total debt is less than $2,500, not a lot of people will meet that one, but the 5 years on the same on the job or in the same line of work, a lot of people do meet that requirement. Cash reserves of at least 3 months, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance after the loan closes. A lot of people meet that one as well. A low payment shock, unfortunately. There is all kind of payment shock going on right now. So if you currently rent and your rent is even $2,000, there's a good chance that your housing payment is going to be $3,000 or more, right? Depending on the type of property that you're purchasing. So there's typically payment shock, but most people, if they have above a 700 credit score, good amount of time at work, or have cash reserves, the cash reserves could be a 401k for reserves, right? So in those cases that they'll be able to go to 50% for the debt to income ratio. Here's a graphic that kind of breaks down the Los Angeles city, okay? Now, I didn't make the city of Los Angeles, okay? So don't blame me for why this thing has a short line going all the way to San Pedro. I didn't make the city, okay? But this is what's defined as the city of Los Angeles. And I wanted to give this graphic so you guys could take a look at, and hopefully it helps you make sense of where the client would have to live to use this program, okay? Basically, the entire valley is included within the city of Los Angeles, okay? Once city of Santa Monica, not included. Culver City, not included. Inglewood, not included, right? Gardena, Compton, not included. That's not a part of the city of LA. But basically, South Central is all here, downtown, right? You even have areas such as Westchester, that's considered a part of the city of LA, San Pedro, Wilmington. There is probably a list of 20 or 30 different communities that are considered the city of Los Angeles. West LA, mid-city Los Angeles, okay? And then, of course, everything else leading up to the valley, almost the entire city of Northridge, Reseda, Tarzana, Encino, North Hollywood, all of that in the city of Hollywood is included, okay? So, excuse me, it's not a city, but the community of Hollywood is considered a part of the city of Los Angeles. Additional guidelines about this. Property must be located within a city of LA, right? Must be owner occupied, right? So you're not using down payment assistance to purchase investment property. Now, if your client decides to do that, that's on them. I will tell you, there are repayment triggers and there are audits that happen to verify if the person really lives there occasionally. I've never heard of it happening, but technically that's what they tell us to tell you, is that they audit, okay? It must be a U.S. citizen, lawful permanent resident, or other qualified alien. Must be a first-time home buyer. Must have a city inspection if they're using the LIPA program. So if you're using MIPA, it's not required. But if you're using LIPA, then you must have a city inspection. You must have a home warranty included on the contract as well. You also must have a termite inspection and clear all Section 1 items to get assistance through the city of LA. One other thing I want to mention, when you're talking about the 1% requirement that the city of LA requires, if you have greater than 1% listed on the purchase agreement, then the city of LA is not going to give them the full amount of money. Let's say the EMD is 3%, okay? But the minimum requirement is 1% from the program. If when they kind of do the calculation, they're not gonna, they're gonna deduct that additional 2% from the assistance they're going to give the borrower, because that's what you negotiated. So essentially, if you want your borrower to pay 1%, 1% has to be listed on the purchase agreement for the City of Los Angeles program, okay? We're going to be jumping into the CalHAPA program next. Any questions about the City of Los Angeles program before we continue? One quick thing about funds. I would still, especially if you have a client that's looking to purchase within the City of LA, submit an application for this, because they don't typically run out of funds quickly. So there's still kind of hope within the next few months. And even if, when they re-up the funds, the client is, already pre-approved, there's no harm in that. They'll be able to kind of jump into the market and purchase something. Okay. So I'm going to keep going, seeing no questions here. Up. Then questions came in. All right. Can you expand on the 1% issue? At what point in process? I'm gonna need you to expand on the question. Just to quickly recap, 1% is required to come from the borrower on the City of Los Angeles program. It has to be the borrower's own funds, so it can't be a gift. It has to be money they have in the bank. If the house is $800,000, then 1% is $8,000. If the house is $500,000, then they have to have $5,000, right? So 1% of the purchase price. All right, next question. Even if the client is trying to repair credit score from 620, that kind of takes us back to an earlier slide, but I do offer credit repair assistance in the form of a process called a credit expert. So when I run credit on one of your clients, the software will tell me if there's credit improvement possible. Okay, so if somebody has a 620, it'll tell me if they can hit 660, which is the minimum required for the LA City program. So that is fine if they can hit 660, but the client has to have enough funds to pay down their bills or what have you in order to get to the 660 and still have the 1% necessary to get into the home. Okay. At what point in the process does it need to be written on the RPA? Correct. So for the if you want your client to only pay 1%, then it has to be on a purchase agreement that the EMD is 1%. Okay, and that way the city gives the maximum amount of money. We had a situation where the realtor put 3%, opened escrow, but we were able to negotiate with the listing agent and the seller to release back 2% of the EMD in order for us to close. And they also, within that, had to, if we didn't close, they were going to relinquish that 1%. So that was a negotiation, right? But we already had the loan approved, but we just, the borrower did, of course, want to spend more than 1%. So we were able to negotiate that, have the listing agent release the other 2%, with the 1% stayed in escrow and got the full amount of money from the program. What about NHS program that has payback? Another one that doesn't have to pay back. Not talking about NHS today, unfortunately, so I don't even want to advise you on a program that I don't know much about. The programs we're talking about today typically have enough funds. They're the most popular. People do have heard of most of these programs. So that's kind of what I'm focused on today. So we're gonna keep it pushing, keep the questions coming, because this is good stuff. So we're transitioning from LA City to the Cal HAFA program, okay? So forget everything I just told you because it does not apply to Cal HAFA, okay? So Cal HAFA is a little different. So let's talk about it. So first thing, Cal HAFA, California Housing Finance Agency, established in 1975. So it's been around for a very long time. And it supports low to moderate income home buyers, typically helping people become first-time home buyers. So, and by the way, we're talking about the standard Cal HAFA loans, not Dreams for All yet, just the standard Cal HAFA loans. We'll talk about Dreams for All shortly. But Cal HAFA right now, today, offers up to 6% of the purchase price and down payment and closing cost assistance. They do offer that on conventional or FHA loans, minimum credit score of 640 for that program. 640, you have to go FHA, okay? I believe it's 660 to go conventional. Maximum debt to income ratio, 40 to 50%, depending on the credit score. Subject to income limits per county for the borrowers on the loan. Home buyer education required. Now, for Cal HAFA, the amount of money they receive for assistance, they don't have to make any monthly payments on, okay? What is considered the down payment assistance has a 1% interest rate. The closing cost assistance has a 0% interest rate. So that's really the cheapest amount of money you're going to get, okay? The cheapest cost, right? 1% interest rate and 0% interest rate, okay? So it doesn't, and it's simple interest on top of that. It's not compound interest. So it makes it very simple to calculate how much money they'll owe year after year, okay? If they sell the house, that's a triggering situation. They have to repay back that money. If they refinance the house as well, whether it's a rate and term or cash out, they have to repay that money. And of course, if they pay off the entire home, then they have to pay back the assistance they received as well. One other quick thing I forgot to mention about the LIPA MIPA program is that if they are refinancing for rate and term on LIPA MIPA, they actually do not have to repay back the assistance they receive. So the city of Los Angeles does allow your client to save money. As long as they're not taking out any cash, they can refinance to a lower payment. Now, Cal HAFA doesn't allow that. You refinance at all, you have to pay back that money, okay? So here's a snapshot of the income limits per county. Keep in mind, we're talking to the Greater Los Angeles Association of Realtors, so most of you are in the LA area. However, CalHFA is good across the state of California. So I've had deals closed in the Bay Area, I've had deals closed in San Diego. So just because we're physically located here doesn't mean we can't help somebody in a different county, different city. As long as they're in the state of California, this is possible for them to be offered. One of the things I do like about the CalHFA program is that they have one of the higher income limits than any other program. So for Los Angeles, for example, $194,000. That is, you can't make above that to purchase. That's pretty generous, okay? To be able to purchase a house that you can't make above that. But if you're below 194,000, you qualify for the program, okay? All right, so the way it kind of works with CalHFA is that there's a down payment assistance through a second mortgage called My Home. That's the 1% interest. There's closing cost assistance through something called ZIP, zero interest program, and it's 0% interest. Now, when a client purchases a house, and excuse me for those of you who may know some of this stuff, I don't mean to, tell you stuff you already know, but I want to make sure for those who don't understand this concept that you kind of get it. When you purchase a house, and let's just say you're not using any down payment assistance, that mortgage that gets recorded is considered your first mortgage, okay? If you were to get a home equity line of credit, then that's considered your second mortgage, okay? For this program, the monthly payment your client is paying on is considered the first mortgage. The down payment assistance is considered the second mortgage, and the closing cost assistance is considered a third mortgage, okay? So that is pretty much how that works, okay? So yes, they will have mortgages recorded on their title because if they were to sell the property, refinance the property, those loans have to be paid off, okay? So yeah, that's that. So some of the pros about the CalHFA program is it can be used anywhere in the state of California. They have high income limits, reduce overall cost to buy. So your client doesn't have to come in with the full, typically if they're putting 3% down and have 3% in closing costs at 6%, this typically will reduce your client's expenses to about 2%. And then it shifts everything to closing costs. Why is that important or good? Because the seller could pay it, right? So depending on how the offer is written, you might have a situation where even if your client puts in 3% and then they get assistance from this program and the seller gives your client a concession, which is money towards closing costs, your client could get refunded their 3% EMD and still close on this transaction, which I have had happen before, okay? It's not typical in this market for sellers to pay closing costs. Of course, if they do, it's probably related to repairs and stuff like that, but technically it's still possible for, or if, depending on how the offer is written, let's say you're factoring in an additional $10,000, something like that, so you can ask the seller for $10,000 back. That could work, assuming the house appraises for the amount that you have listed in the purchase agreement, okay? Cons. So on the CalHFA program, the interest rate is higher than a standard loan, okay? So CalHFA has their own interest rates that change per day. If they're low income, then they actually get a cheaper interest rate, cheaper cost for mortgage insurance as well. If they're considered moderate income, then the interest rate is a little higher, okay? But in comparison to a standard loan, the interest rates are definitely higher, okay? So that's one thing to keep in mind, that interest rates are higher if they're going to be using down payment assistance, okay? The cons, of course, is they have to pay the funds back and the borrower has a second and third mortgage. But when we're talking about creating home ownership, this program allows a client who did not have enough funds to purchase. That is a great benefit within itself, right? In most cases, after a few years, a lot of clients are refinancing the house from whatever their interest rate is and paying off the second and third mortgage, getting down to a lower payment, in some cases eliminating their mortgage insurance. And all of that stuff is possible through this program, right? So, of course, if they have to pay a higher interest rate now, that doesn't mean they have to pay a high interest rate for 30 years, right? When interest rates go down, they can refinance to that lower rate. They have to have enough equity to be able to refinance, but the way things are going, and it seems like they're going to continue to go, these prices are going to continue to go up. So they should be able to achieve equity. It's already slated to have, well, last year we had 5% appreciation. This year, they're anticipating another 5% in appreciation, okay? So just kind of keep that in mind. If things continue to go up by 5% per year, it's about 4 years before they have 20% in equity. They can refinance, depending on if they have a little bit more equity than 20%, get rid of the mortgage insurance, get to a lower rate, and they're still within their home. So great for those reasons. Any questions about CalHFA before we keep it pushing? Let me know if you guys have any questions so far. If not, we're going to transition into the GSFA program. So I'm going to keep it going. Keep the questions coming as well, okay? Don't be shy. All right, GSFA Platinum. So this is Golden State Finance Agency. GSFA, I would be honest with you guys and say it's not the top one that you would probably want to use, okay? I would lean towards the other 3 programs we're discussing today over GSFA. However, where GSFA comes in handy is they actually do give assistance up to 4 units, right? So your client can purchase units using GSFA, but the downfall to GSFA is that they're required to make payments on that assistance. So the assistance they get towards the down payment and closing costs, they basically have a 15-year term, and the interest rate is 2% higher than whatever the first mortgage is. So they have to make basically concurrent payments, right? Payments on the first mortgage and payments on the second mortgage of assistance over a term of 15 years. However, if the property is income producing or something like that, this could still be a great situation for your buyer, especially if it's a 2 to 4 unit property, okay? 640 credit score is a minimum for GSFA, up to 50%. We kind of talked about the debt to income ratio a little bit. They should anticipate having to have at least 2%, okay? So even though, this question hasn't come up, but I want you guys to try to understand this. Even though they're offering 5.5% towards the first mortgage, and let's say that it's 3% down needed to purchase a single family residence, right? That leaves another 2.5% to cover closing costs. But in most these banks do not pay the lender. So the lender has to factor in their compensation, which is typically somewhere between 1% to 2%, right? So that is why your client needs to have about 2%, 1% to 2% available to pay the lender, right? So kind of keep that in mind because these programs don't factor us in, unfortunately. Now, LIPA MIPA, different story, and the same thing with Dreams for All, but on a particular GSFA product, that is why they, and also the standard CalHFA, that is why they need at least 2%, okay? What else are we talking about? Okay, so GSFA. The standard loan is kind of what we discussed, the platinum standard, where they have to repay to 15 years, okay? All right, but there's also something called Select. Select is basically good for your firefighters, your first responders, your police officers. They actually allow 1.5% of the assistance they give to be considered a gift. So they don't have to repay 1.5% of the amount of money if they're in those fields. Medical professionals are also included within that, okay? So your nurses, your EMTs, I've even had some care providers be listed in there, IHSS. So, there's something to keep in mind that Select is great. Now, this assist to own, honestly, they really have to be almost outside of the LA area. So I haven't done any of those particular products, but it's just good to know that it's there. If they're employed by a county outside of Los Angeles County, they can actually receive assistance as well, okay? Last but not least, let's talk about Dreams for All, okay? So I had a little saying, dreams for all has been a nightmare for most. Okay. So when it first came out, the product, the funds were gone in 2 weeks. All right. So after that happened, and only a few people were really able to take advantage of the program, Cal Hatha wanted to come up with a way to make it a little easier for people to get funds and know they're going to get the funds, but also help the right people, right? So they came up with the first generation requirement. They also have now created a lottery, right? So in order for people to kind of get this money, they need to be pre-approved, and they also need to receive a letter back from the lender stating they're pre-approved, how much they're pre-approved up to, how much assistance they need. They submit that information into the portal when it opens up in April. So right now is kind of the time, if you have people that may not ever be able to achieve home ownership without some assistance. Let's get their information in. Let's get them pre-approved. Let's get their letter ready. So when a portal opens up, they can submit that and be able to hopefully get the funds, right? Those funds basically are allocated to them. So they don't have to worry about not getting the funds after it's been allocated to them. And I believe they have up to either 90 or 120 days to basically find a house. Okay. So the Dreams for All is a shared appreciation loan. We're going to talk about that next, but they're going to give up to 20% or $150,000 towards the down payment and closing costs. Okay. So for Dreams for All, this is just another example of how the repayment works. You purchase a home for $500,000. Their first mortgage, if they gave you down payment assistance of $100,000, your first mortgage is then $400,000. Okay. In this example, 5 years later, the home is now valued at $640,000, which means the home appreciated $140,000. Okay. The homeowner would then have to repay back the appreciation along with the down payment assistance. Okay. So if the initial amount was $100,000 they received, they have to pay that back. Plus they have to pay back basically 20% of the appreciation. Okay. So that's what this basically is breaking down. And then it kind of goes a little bit further here to talk about the balances. So this is a snapshot you guys could take and review, but ideally that's how the Dreams for All program works. So outside of Dreams for All, we do offer other down payment assistance products. Okay, we couldn't cover it all today. We do offer a program called Daisy and Grow that allows for 1% down. We do have an FHA 100% where the borrower doesn't have to have a down payment at all. There is a City of Long Beach program that offers $25,000 as a grant. Okay, the only caveat really to that one, they have to fall under their income limits, but they also have to live within the City of Long Beach. Okay. So if they live within the City of Long Beach and is purchasing within the City of Long Beach, they could get a $25,000 grant to help them achieve that. There is 1% down conventional loans as well, where, but this is really only recommended for like the lower price cities and counties in Los Angeles, okay? Because I think they have a max purchase price of like $300,000, which is not, it's not LA for sure. But anywhere else that where that's possible, they could technically put 1% down. And of course, we have the 5% down on 2 to 4 unit conventionals. Okay. I did also include the income limits per county for the Dreams for All program. So that's something that I did want to kind of point out to you guys. It is different than a standard Cal Hatha. So for Los Angeles, they cannot make more than 155,000, for example. And they have everything else kind of listed here: Sacramento, San Diego, all the different counties that are located here in California. For those of you who do not know, there is a 3% down conventional product. You do not even have to be a first-time home buyer to take advantage of that. There are different programs for 3% down. Some require first-time home buyers, some do not. So you do not have to be a first-time home buyer. They start as low as 620 credit score. So if you have clients that have the money in most cases, it's better for them to put the money down, get the lower interest rate if that's the case. LA City doesn't have a higher rate, so that's a great program for that reason. Cal Halfa for Dreams for All, they have not released their interest rates yet, so I couldn't tell you if it's higher or lower. They haven't released the interest rates yet, so that could still, it could be a good thing or a bad thing. We'll have to see, but of course, 20% down helps a lot. But just to make sure you guys are aware, because there's like an urban legend that you have to put 20% down if you're getting conventional loan, and that is not true. 3% is the minimum on a conventional loan. If the client wants to put 5% down, 10% down, of course they can do that as well, but 3% down is the minimum. They become subject to mortgage insurance if they're not putting 20% down, so keep that in mind, but technically it's still possible. I have a snapshot here of the minimum down payments across the board. FHA is 3.5%. Monarch Mortgage does have down to 500 credit score. You can do a 10% down loan on FHA. A lot of banks don't offer that product. I have closed on it. The client was actually putting 30% down. That's not everybody, but they had a 550 credit score. Okay, we were able to get that done for them. On conventional Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, you have to have at least a 620 to get those loans. And VA, we can actually go as low as 500 credit score as well, okay? Also included the minimum amounts for 2 units and 3 to 4 units for those of you who typically have those questions. How much do I have to put down if it's a conventional loan? How much do I have to put down if it's a 2-unit, right? Stuff like that. As well as the investments. Everybody, some people own a home already and they need to, and they're looking to purchase an investment property. So this is the rules for that as well, okay? So we do offer, once again, all programs outside of down payment assistance. So don't just call me with your client that doesn't have money all the time, right? You can call me with clients that have money too. We do jumbo loans, we do FHA, we do conventional, we do our DSCRs and non-QM products as well. So kind of keep that in mind. Wanted to make sure I stress that because down payment assistance is great, but it's not all that we do. We do everything. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave this to questions. If anybody has any questions, feel free to either post it in the chat or ask it live. You can actually unmute yourself as well and let me know what you guys are thinking. The recording question, I think that was just addressed by the Greater Los Angeles Association. It will be posted online, I believe.
It will be posted on our e-library in a few days, probably by Tuesday of next week. It'll be posted on our e-library.
Perfect. Any other questions before we discontinue? All right, I do have a question here. Let's see. What is required in order to purchase a home under your LLC? Great question. So if you're purchasing under a business, typically you have to purchase it putting about 20% down. It needs to be a business purpose loan in most cases, and that's the reason why. In most cases, if somebody wants to purchase a house, it's almost better to purchase it owner occupied or what have you and transfer it into the LLC so they could put down less than 20%. However, great question, and it's something that something that's coming up more and more as people want to shield themselves from any liability, right? So yes, if you're trying to purchase a home under LLC, the general rule of thumb is you have to put 20% down to do that. However, there are ways around that as well. Allison, thank you for your comment. So great. Christy as well. Okay, let's see here. If you own a rental property currently, I wouldn't be considered a first-time home buyer. If I sell, do I have to wait 3 years to be considered a first-time home buyer again? That would be correct. There are GSFA would allow you to purchase a house and use assistance without being considered a first-time home buyer though. So that program would probably be best for you if you're looking to sell a property and not wait 3 years. Okay.
All right, Carlton, that was some great information. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So
I-
thank you all for having me. Scott, you can take it away.
I did put in the chat, if you haven't registered for our government affairs, not government, I'm sorry, our legal update with Gov Hutchinson, please do so. It's going to be a great event. It is a free lunch for our members. The link is right there, and we also have plenty of other classes and events coming up. Just check our calendar, and everybody give Carlton a virtual round of applause. That was wonderful information.
Absolutely. I'll be posting my information in the chat. Should have did it a long time ago. But of course, you guys can also find my information on the Greater Los Angeles website, listed under affiliate partners. And once again, thank you for attending.